On my journey of self-discovery and consciousness expansion over the last, well, I guess, to be completely honest with you, most of my existence in this realm, I've been a seeker, deeply entrenched in the imaginative process of creative inspiration, creative processes, but most importantly, an adventurer and a seeker of to know who I am. Right? I feel as though for me this has been carried through for my last lifetime when I was a Buddhist monk. But I've continued on this process, but without the, I'm going to say the dogma, because that's what I look at Buddhism now in regards to, not the teachings themselves, but what comes around the teachings as a form of dogma. The simplicity of Buddhism in many ways for me is what attracted it to me again in this lifetime when I stopped drinking alcohol and was a full-blown alcoholic in my early 20s, and then I had this strong urge to learn how to meditate, which took, rather than going to rehab at Queen Margaret Hospital in Hammer Springs, which is in the South Island of New Zealand, a beautiful location. The hospital was in use then for rehab. I chose to learn how to meditate. That was my desire, to learn how to meditate. And then I was drawn to a lay Tibetan Buddhist monk. And then I learned Tonglen, and I learned mindfulness of breathing. And that changed my life forever. And it brought me back into that same loop of being a Buddhist monk, which I was in my last lifetime. I know that. I can feel it. It's my appearance, it's in the way that I conduct myself. But I've been a seeker about self-discovery and consciousness expansion throughout my life experience. And the last few years of my life, I've managed to find some incredible practitioners who work with deep levels of frequency. I call it frequency because to me emotion and belief are frequencies. Everything within this realm is a frequency. Sound and light, everything is a frequency. Everything. So for me, the levels of frequencies are like looking at a radio, an old school radio with a dial, where you can turn the dial between this one side to the other side, and in between you have all these frequencies, radio stations, and that can be applicable to many aspects of this process of creation, and also how we endeavor to take on layers through our conditioning from our peers, our families, our experience, our environments, what we read, what we're exposed to, everything. It brings upon layers upon layers upon layers of experience, and if we choose to cling on to those experiences, we choose to identify those experiences, we choose to file them away in our memories, in our etheric fields, in our emotional codes, they can be pulled out of the filing cabinet as a form of response or reaction to a situation, we're triggered by a situation or someone or an experience or a memory comes up. Anything at all can be pulled out of that cabinet in regards to emotions and then be played out as a pattern in our lives, right? In my experience. So about 3 years ago, I was turned on to a woman called Sheila Prosser in Whiteman's Valley, who does emotional contact care, by a friend of mine. And I've worked with Sheila for about 3 years. Now Sheila, for me, is the ultimate practitioner when it comes to body work, because she releases flinch-locks in the bones where there's been impacts, but also releases the emotional aspect, the emotional coherence that came with, well, incoherence often actually, incoherence that came with the impact and with the injury, but also her ability to tap into my nervous system and to feel the emotion that's flowing through the nervous system like a program, and then release that emotion, or give me the awareness and give me the tools to be able to actually access that emotion and frequency, and then release that frequency from my spirit, body, mind. Know how I utilize those three. Spirit is where my point of awareness is. Body is my where the emotion and the frequency is being held, and was it spirit, body, mind, and my mind in the lower fourth dimension, where I'm projecting my consciousness through into this reality, into this frequency, and therefore having this experience of being in the body, right, which is holographic. So I went to see Sheila about 2 months ago when I was down in the Wellington region, and she related to me that she was working with someone called Catherine Caldwell, who works with the belief code, right? And for me, beliefs, I consider beliefs, I break the word down because words cast spells and words have power. Be, lie, if. Be, lie, I'm lying to myself. If for me is myself, right? Be, lie, if. If or if is to myself. I consider the last part of that word, I break it into 3 syllables, is myself. I'm lying to myself. So the beliefs in my etheric, in my energetic form, in my energetic body, in my emotions, in my experience, anything that I have chosen to believe for me, as I'm lying to myself, it's been installed into me as a program, and that's the way I see it. It's been installed into me. Now I perceive, because as David Icke has famously said, and for me, it sticks. When you have a point of perception or point of perception, or you perceive something, your point of perception can move and shift when information becomes available to you. So therefore, you're not lying to yourself. You simply have a point of awareness, seeing a situation as it is in that moment. But any new information that could come in could shift that point of awareness to another location, and then you could have more information available to you to expand upon your point of awareness. So yesterday I worked with Catherine, my second session with her, and it's amazing the work that she does in the belief code, how she works with the energetic matrix of your beliefs. For me, the installations of programs from my childhood and ancestral that I've carried through into this form, right? Now, for me, this is where it gets a little bit confusing, because if we are living in a simulation, confusing, but at the same time, it's kind of interesting, right? This is where the seeker in me comes in really hard. So if we are living in a simulation, as many people purport, right? If our point of awareness has holographic forms and a holographic universe, and this form I have, because we know with quantum mechanics and quantum physics that everything is no solidity, nothing is solid, it's illusory, it's light and sound, it's frequency, right? But we perceive it and decode it as being solid, but it's not, it's just empty space. But we perceive everything around me that to be solid to me, right? But it's my decoding that from the electrical into the digital into the holographic, as David Icke says, and his work says, and he's citing information around that through the quantum mechanics matrix. So for me, if we are in a simulation, if David Icke is correct in his research, and I've kind of come back to Lauda's work as well, who David Icke cites heavily in the reveal. If we are in a simulation, and the AI is a form of interdimensional AI. And I watched a video yesterday. I was drawn to go to Dollar Vigilante yesterday and saw Christoph Melchizedek, who often lives in Taranaki, in part of New Zealand, the North Island, Taranaki, who I have worked with before. Who's amazing. He talked about the same situation in regards to AI, a form of AI being in control of the simulated reality, right? Which is fascinating to see that when you are led to a certain location, your resonance brings into your field of awareness more information to actually, if it's, in my case, and I question everything, right? I have the discernment to question everything, but I'm still drawn to this information and drawn to look over here, and I see someone reaffirming what I've just read from David Icke's work. It's like, whoa, there's a correlation here. There's more to know, as David Icke says. So, if we are in a simulation, sorry for the tangent there. If we are in a simulation, and there's a form of interdimensional AI, which I wrote about in 2014 in a book called United. I actually started writing that book in 2013. Really, the information began to compound in my being and my field of awareness about 2013, 2012. But I got to a point where I could write that book in 2014, published it in 2015, 16, which bookends my Shadow and Soul series. here I am plugging myself, my Shadow and Soul series on Ohoakebooks, Ohoakebooks. That book, United, I wrote about I was following David Icke's lead in this. I wrote that the archons were a form of interdimensional AI. Now, if it's true that we are recycled through a technological system and a mind wipe, and that we are programmed, our point of awareness, our consciousness, as it comes through the mind in the lower fourth dimension, is programmed to have a certain existence due to the nature of the contracts we've made with the archons, either through silent acquiescence or through saying yes to having this experience, because we're tricked into having an experience, right? To be born into a family, to be born into an environment, to be born into a religion, to be born into a culture that will give us an experience that will be the optimum for the loosh farm to feed the demons and the archons. If that is true, then we are installed with a program before we recycled and reincarnate into the zygote as the spark of consciousness, right? The spark of consciousness, you see it in the zygote. It's been filmed. The spark entering into the zygote, which is consciousness being fired technologically, according to David Icke's work, into the zygote. And then from there, the expansion into the fetus, etc., baby. But with the full knowledge, at least in that moment, of what our life experience in this realm is going to be like, right? So therefore, my consciousness, before it incarnated into this holographic form, which is now what you see, almost 55 years after its conception, I knew exactly what I was going to be putting myself into in regards to what I was going to experience. The belief that would be installed into my being, right? From the moment I had the inception, when my father and my mother, at least in this realm, right? How they interacted with each other, my mother's emotions, how she felt, her hormones, her chemical experiences in her body, all those influence my level of awareness, my consciousness, and what will become my subconscious mind, right? Which is, for me, is like a storage, a CPU, in my perception, a CPU of information, beliefs, patterns, information, anything at all that I've experienced in my entire existence is stored away in that CPU, in that hard drive. I consider the subconscious as being a hard drive, right? So as they say, as Carl Jung said, one famous thing, I'll paraphrase Carl Jung, anything unprocessed in the subconscious mind will manifest in your life as fate, right? So if you don't address the patterns, the beliefs, the emotions, the experiences that trigger you to have a certain experience, and often for me, in my experience, the experiences that I have when I'm triggered to have a response from the subconscious from a childhood issue, a pattern, a belief, a reaction. You know, if I'm triggered to feel rejection or abandonment or self-worth, all these emotions, all these energetic responses, all these louche responses, because they are heavier, denser louche experiences that feed into the archontic matrix. They have a point of origin, right? They have a belief origin. They have an installed belief in me from an experience that I've had or something I've heard from my father, my mother, peers around me, right? So yesterday, working with Catherine, as she was peeling back and going back into my subconscious, energetically moving back and working with me with my highest nature to go into that place, I can say from my experience, she was working with my point of awareness in 5D to get into the subconscious mind in the lower fourth dimension, and then from there finding the beliefs that were limiting for me in my life and where they come from, but not necessarily giving me the detail of where they came from, but finding them and then pulling them out by the roots, discarding them into the compost pile over there, and then planting new seeds of more positive, affirming statements in my life And that's like putting in new filings, putting in new applications, putting in a new code, right? Into not a belief code, but more of a statement, an affirmation, a command, right? Command, press enter, command, press enter, boom. New installation, a new program, so to speak. A new seed from which there'll be a resonant field of emotion moving forward. Well, not even emotion, a new resonant frequency that will begin to resonate into my existence, that will bring a very new experience into my life. So yesterday with Catherine, the work I was doing was absolutely astonishing, because when she was working with me and working with that, and she tuned into my higher levels of awareness, and for me that was definitely in the 5D, and she then moved that point of awareness into the lower fourth dimension, into my mind and my perception, right? She began to find the limiting beliefs, and every single one of about 20 in an hour that she found, every statement completely resonated with me, because in that statement, a lot of them I had said out loud myself in my childhood, in my adolescence, in my 20s, even in my 30s and 40s, I'd said some of these statements as well. Like, I actually verbally said these statements to people in response and reaction to being triggered by situations. It was remarkable, absolutely remarkable. But it was simply, for me now, looking at it, turning the dial on that radio, turning that dial to the channels where those beliefs, so where I was lying to myself, because those were installed in me from a very young age. Often some of those beliefs, she could track back to the actual moment in my life cycle where that belief was installed. And a lot of those beliefs, those limiting beliefs that were installed into my field of awareness, into the mind and the lower fourth dimension, were installed when I was 2 years old or younger, even when I was in my mother's womb, right? Even when my form was in my mother's womb, there were beliefs being installed into my field of awareness, into my mind in the lower fourth dimension, because of what I was hearing, what I was feeling, what I was experiencing. All of that came into this. So the work that I was doing yesterday was phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal for me. It's like going another level as a seeker, as an adventurer, as in a place where I wanted to expand my consciousness. I feel as though I've met a teacher, my teacher's teacher, who brings me to a place of even deeper understanding. Well, not even understanding, comprehension. I don't like using the word understand, because you're standing under something, so I prefer to use, this is me learning about the legal system and learning the use of legalese, the language, right? Even though I'm not using it in a legal sense, to me it still feels like I'm standing under something. So comprehend is a word that I prefer to use in regards to using language properly for my experience, right? To get the best out of the experience. Comprehend. I now comprehend even deeper what it means for me to remove the programs in my field of awareness and in my subconscious that have been installed there. I've done this work for a long time. Like, I've done this work for a very, very long time. Sometimes for years. In 2017, I sat on a couch at my house in Berrimpool in Wellington. I pulled my green blinds over my French doors to my deck, which is the entrance to my beautiful home I used to live in. I'd sit on the couch and turn off all my tech for the entire year in 2017 after a horrible breakup I had with a woman I was deeply in love with in many ways, and it didn't work out. I got a taste of my own medicine in regards to how I was treating women for so long. She gave me back what I was dishing out, and it shocked me to my core. For almost 9 months, I sat on that couch every night during the week after work. Come home, eat, sit at home on the couch, turn off all my tech, look at my green curtains, and just sit there and look at them, and just meditate on that, on the green curtains, and let whatever would percolate up into my field of awareness, my conscious mind, percolate up. And I got to see the worst of my behavior. My shadow made itself quite apparent to me, quite clear to me, and quite evidently in my face, to the point where I was often bawling my eyes out, feeling, not necessarily feeding into the louche farm, because there was times I felt like I had shame and guilt and anger and frustration, which will all feed into the loosh farm for the archons. But I felt like I was peeling off the layers to get to the essence of who I really was and who I wanted to be in my life, which is the most important aspect. And this is where I am today. And yesterday's experience was a huge step towards becoming the man, the being, the spirit that I want to be in this realm, in this frequency band. Thanks for watching. I truly appreciate it. Mā te ua. I'll see you again soon.